If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment cause chaos. Use ShipStation instead. From running a business out of your garage to multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating tasks. Plus, you'll get the best shipping rates from global carriers. Calm the chaos with the shipping software that delivers. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.
You're listening to Missing Persons, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime,
Citizen Detective, and
Campus Killings.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its creators, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss a missing persons case on this podcast, please be sure to visit missingpersonspodcast.net. This episode may contain unsettling or disturbing subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
If you'd like to support Missing Persons and get VIP access to things like ad-free listening, early preview episodes, and bonus content of not only this show, but for every other podcast on the AbJack network of indie podcasts, consider subscribing to the show with an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcast. For only $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year, you'll unlock a variety of listener benefits, and you'll be supporting the show in the process. Your support is greatly appreciated. Hey everyone, this is Mike Morford, co-host of Missing Persons. In the last episode, we discussed the first part of an update on a very old case, one almost 80 years in the making, the 1945 disappearance of Mary Jane Croft VanGilder. In this episode, in part 2 of the update, you'll hear from Detective Adam Turner, who solved this case, and he lays out exactly what went into closing it and what unanswered questions still remain. Hi Adam, thank you for coming on Missing Persons once again to talk about this huge juggernaut of a case that you've been able to crack.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me on your show, and it's definitely been a journey to get where we are.
Yeah, and for listeners that didn't catch our first episode on Mary Jane Croft VanGilder, they can always go back and listen to that and listen to our first, go around with you and learn a little bit more of the things before the case was solved. But you were tasked with this seemingly impossible juggernaut of a case, solving a missing persons case from 1945. And I'm terrible at math. What is that, 80 years ago almost, basically?
78, 80 years ago.
Yeah. So that just seems like, we hear cases, maybe 20, 30 years old getting solved, but that just seems like, so long ago. It just seemed like it would be such an uphill battle, but you stuck with it and you wanted to solve it. Just to recap for listeners, how did the case wind up in your lap? And when you got it and you looked at it, how hopeful and realistic did you think it was that you were going to solve this case?
So I got the case in October of 2018, and the way I got it was that the chief of police, Lance Combs, had put something on our departmental Facebook page about how he had been contacted earlier in 2018 from Mindy Wilson, telling him that her grandmother, Mary Jane Croft VanGilder, was missing from Ohio. She was working here in Shelby at an Army Air Force depot in 1945. She was originally from Fairmont, West Virginia, but she came up here to work. And the family, since 1945, had kind of done their own investigation, really exhausted all resources, back in the 40s and 50s, there was some attempt by law enforcement in West Virginia made to try to find Mary Jane, but they were unsuccessful. So when I got the case, it really was just a few documents and pictures. It was like Mary Jane's birth certificate, her marriage license to James Wesley VanGilder, that was issued in they got married in West Virginia in Fairmont in 1929, I believe. And that was pretty much about it. There was probably 4 or 5 pieces of paper. And I walked into the chief's office and I said, I'll take on that case. And he said, okay, here you go. He handed me the little information that we had. And then he said, you're never going to find her. And I was hopeful, I was optimistic, but I was also realistic too, that it would be a major uphill battle. So the case really kind of took on a life of its own once we got the public involved, once we started publicizing her case. And then we started doing other things throughout the investigation, and that got media attention. And then it just the case just kept expanding, and my reports and everything just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So yeah, it definitely took on a life of its own.
It sounds like it was, maybe a case where you have to open up a puzzle box and take out all the pieces and just start, okay, I've got these few, I figure out where these go, and then I can get these other pieces. It seems like you really had to piece this together. And, I would think that a missing persons case unfolding today is a whole different animal, because you're going to have social media to look at, you're going to have phones to ping, you're going to have digital trails, you're going to have potential surveillance footage to review. There's all kinds of different nuggets of things to work with today that you wouldn't have had for this case back in 1945. So I'm assuming this would be a totally different type of investigation if she went missing in 2024.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you mentioned, credit cards is a great way to track people. We have license plate readers that can pick up, vehicle license plates, and those are all over the country, that departments have access to. I have access to social media, cell phone records. We can ping cell phones and find out a general location of where that cell phone is. But in this case, we had none of that.
So you basically are starting, as you mentioned, with a few pieces of paper, and then just having to try and, find your way to maybe the next clue, and just slowly build up little things to work with.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of hurdles, there were a lot of challenges. Obviously, like James, her husband at the time, James VanGilder, he ended up raising Mary Jane and his 5 children. But he had died back in the 80s. So, I couldn't talk to him. I couldn't get information from him. All of Mary Jane's siblings had died. Her parents had died. She did have children that were living, and a great source of information from day one was her eldest daughter, Anna Mae Rager. And Anna Mae had really kind of been looking for her mother since probably 1949, I think, was the earliest documentation that we were able to find, where she was writing letters to law enforcement in West Virginia, writing letters to law enforcement in Ohio, to include the Plymouth Police Department, which is where Mary Jane lived, and Plymouth is a village just north of Shelby. As far as them contacting us back then, we had absolutely no records at all of Mary Jane. There was never a report filed with us. Her name never came across anything. We talked to old police chiefs that are still living, and they too had no recollection of the case. So yeah, we were basically starting with some memories from Anna Mae of her mother and the work that she had done. Anna Mae had, she had obviously advanced in age, and she kind of was slowing down in her research. So she kind of handed it off to her niece, Mindy. And, Mindy was the one that contacted us, but Anna Mae was a great source of information from day one.
When an online shopper places an order, how that package arrives matters. I'm Al Coe, the CEO of ShipStation. Our promise is to make that process as easy as possible for you. ShipStation provides a robust platform to manage everything you sell, automate manual shipping tasks, and get the lowest possible carrier rates. Keep your team and your customers happy. Go to ShipStation.com to sign up for your free trial. That's ShipStation.com.
And it seems like in a case this old that you would, want to sort of appeal for help, tips, things like that. And I think you did. I think you're on different podcasts. You did different interviews. It was in the newspapers a lot, what you were working on, just trying to maybe shake something loose. And it seems like maybe that worked because I think one of the things that helped solve this case, and correct me if I'm wrong, was a tip from a citizen sleuth that came in regarding the name Percy Sebron. How did that tip help keep the case going, or really give it some new momentum?
So I have to backtrack a little bit here. Mary Jane, obviously when she was working here in Shelby, she was working at the Wilkins Army Air Force Depot. And the Army Air Force Depot distributed parts during World War II. So I assumed that she had some type of military file. There was a fire at the National Archives just outside St. Louis in the 70s. And I assumed, based on the time that Mary Jane was serving in the government, that her file had been burned. But during my the podcasts, and I was on Facebook, and I was on obviously your show, and the local newspapers were really good to us. I was contacted by somebody that said that sworn personnel at the depot, those are the records that were burned, but civilian records were kept at another location. So I did a freedom of information request to the National Archives, and I was able to obtain her military file, which contained her Social Security number. And that was something that the family kind of had been looking for years and never had. And while I was excited that we were able to find her Social Security number, when I tried to track it through the Social Security Administration, there was no activity on that Social Security number after 1945. It showed her working in West Virginia in 1944, and then it showed her working obviously here in Shelby in 1945, but there was nothing after that. So I published that military file online, and the military file was, there was a lot there. I was surprised at how much was there, seeing how old the case was. And I had some, I did appeal to the public, and I asked, anybody for help, because I really needed help. I can't do everything. And a lot of times, somebody might offer a different perspective, or have time that I don't have, to be able to research into things. So in early November of last year, I had been contacted by a civilian who had been following Mary Jane's case for several years. I had been in contact with this person over the years, and they had, come up with some ideas and theories, and they would bounce ideas off of me, but there was nothing that really, once I vetted them out, panned out. They were dead ends. But in November, this person contacted me and said that she was going to go through Mary Jane's military file, kind of with a fine-tooth comb. And I said, have at it. Let me know what you find. And there were, dozens and dozens of names in Mary Jane's military file. People that did her onboarding, people that hired her, people that accepted her resignation in 1945. But there was one name in the file that stood out to this civilian once she vetted the name. Mary Jane, when she originally started at the Air Force Depot, was a warehouse stocker. She stocked the shelves of a warehouse, and she was promoted to a forklift operator. And it said in the military file that the person whom she was replacing was named Percy Sebring. So this civilian had traced Percy L. Sebring and found that he found a find-a-grave showing that he died in Kansas City, Missouri in April 14th of 1969. But it also showed that he had married a Mary J. Sebring, who was born on November 19th, 1911, and died on May 31st, 1990. They were both buried in New Forest Cemetery in Forest, Louisiana. So Mary Jane Croft VanGilder's birthday was the same, November 19th of 1911. So when we started looking into Mary J. Sebring, we found some documents on Ancestry showing that she listed her maiden name at some point as Croft, which it was. But I was still kind of, I was excited at this point, but I was also still kind of skeptical, just because.
I imagine you probably along the way had gotten your hopes up about things and only to have them smashed.
Yes, we exhumed several bodies, unidentified bodies. One here in Ohio, one in Indiana, and one in Wisconsin. And two are still unidentified. They're going forensic testing. We were able to identify the one we did in Ohio. It actually was not a female, as they thought back in the 60s, but it was a male, and his name was Albert Frost. So, that was a whole nother investigation that kind of spawned from Mary Jane's case. And so I was happy to close, Albert Frost and be able to give his family some closure of where he was. But I did, once I found out that that wasn't Mary Jane, and I said, we'll just keep going forward. But I was kind of running out of things to do. I knew that. I mean, I guess my plan was to continue to try to find unidentified bodies and see if they matched the physical characteristics of Mary Jane. That was my plan. So yeah, I mean, there were highs and lows. There were times I thought, hey, this could be a good lead. There were other times I just said, I don't know if we're ever going to solve this. It just might be one of those cases that is unsolved forever.
But then you get the Sebring lead, and the name matches up. The maiden name was the same and the same date of birth. So that had to seem like you had to be pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, I still, you're looking at it and you're like, this. I still was kind of like, this can't be real. It was because it happened kind of so suddenly. It wasn't like, it was just kind of something that developed quickly overnight. Like, I talked to this civilian the night before, and they told me that they were going to go through Mary Jane's military file, and it was like that. That's fine, thank you. And by the morning when I woke up, I had multiple messages from this person, saying that I really needed to look into Percy Sebring. So through Ancestry, we were able to deduce that Mary Jane and Percy had 2 children together. One was named Kenneth, and he did not have any children. And the other one was Percy Jr., and he was born in December of 1945. So that is probably the reason that Mary Jane left her employment here in Shelby, was that she was pregnant with Percy Jr. Now, Percy Jr. did have 4 children that were living. Jeff, Mary, Aubrey, and Bobby Sebring. So I was able to locate Bobby Sebring on Facebook, and I sent her a message and just said, kind of gave her the key points of my investigation. And I sent her pictures of Mary Jane from, the 40s, and asked if this could be her grandmother. And she said, "Oh, I only have a couple pictures of her, and they are of her later in life." So she sent them to me, and they were probably photographs from the 70s or 80s, and it did look very similar. I mean, it looked like it could be an older Mary Jane, but it was still kind of on the fence. And then I had one of those pictures kind of digitally enhanced, so we could see the facial features better, and we did like a side-by-side comparison of one of Mary Jane's pictures from the 40s, and it was, it was a very distinct similarity. So this Bobby, she was kind of the youngest, so her older siblings would have known their grandmother better, and they had additional pictures of her. So once Bobby reached out to her siblings, they were able to provide me with pictures of Mary Jane and Percy Sr. from probably 1950s, and it was very evident that it was her. I mean, it was just, everything really matched up. So, but I knew that we still had to do a DNA test. I mean, I knew at that point it was solved, but I knew that I had to compare it, Mary Jane's, her grandchildren from her second marriage to her grandchildren and children from her first marriage. So once we did a DNA test on Mary Sebring, it did show that she was directly related to Mary Jane's first family. So it was her without a doubt.
Wow.
When an online shopper places an order, How that package arrives matters. I'm Al Coe, the CEO of ShipStation. Our promise is to make that process as easy as possible for you. ShipStation provides a robust platform to manage everything you sell, automate manual shipping tasks, and get the lowest possible carrier rates. Keep your team and your customers happy. Go to ShipStation.com to sign up for your free trial. That's ShipStation.com.
Beautiful Anonymous changes each week. It defies genres and expectations. For example, our most recent episode, I talked to a woman who survived a murder attempt by her own son. But just the week before that, we just talked the whole time about Star Trek. We've had other recent episodes about sexting in languages that are not your first language, or what it's like to get weight loss surgery. It's unpredictable, it's real, it's honest, it's raw. Get Beautiful Anonymous wherever you listen to podcasts.
So what was that like, getting that news that, okay, the DNA says that, these two families are related, and that this is the person you're looking for?
It was exciting, but it was also kind of a relief for me, because I'd carried the case for 5.5, 6 years, and I put a lot of work into it. I wrote a lot of reports. I traveled to different states, and we did kind of all kinds of things. And I was told multiple times by people inside my agency, not the chief. The chief was always very supportive of everything that I did, but other members of my agency and members of the public, that this was kind of a waste of time, that we'd never find her, and basically no one was left alive that would care. Really unkind things. So I was excited that it was solved. I couldn't believe it was solved. I was relieved because I could finally close the case, and I didn't have to carry the case anymore. And I was happy that I could give the family some closure, but I was also it felt good to kind of prove those people wrong that had such negative opinions. So yeah, it was a mix of emotions for me.
I'm curious. You see, you get these answers, and now you've got to break this news to her granddaughter. We found your grandmother, but you've got to deliver other news that maybe she wasn't expecting, that she voluntarily left her old life and her old family. What was that experience like? How did she take that news? That seems like a major bit of news to get.
So what I would have liked to have done was get to travel. Mary Jane's daughter, her eldest daughter, lives in Georgia, and I would have liked to have flown down there and told her in person, but her health she was ailing and she was failing, and I didn't know how much time she had left, so I really wanted to tell her before something happened to her. So I called Mindy, and I said, I think I found your grandmother, and she didn't believe it at first either. And then I sent the pictures, the side-by-side comparison, and she was stunned. I mean, she couldn't believe it. And obviously it was a relief for her as well. And, she was happy because, she was able to give her aunt and herself and her sister closure. But it was also difficult for them. And Anna Mae, Mary Jane's daughter, was told in person by one of her grandchildren. So the news kind of spread out through the family that we had thought that we had solved it, but it was also difficult, for me and for the family, because I had to tell this family that she she voluntarily left. She essentially abandoned them, her first family, to start this new life. And that's a difficult pill to swallow. So yeah, I think the family had a lot of emotions about hearing that news as well. They were relieved that it was over, but it was also sad and disappointing that she did what she did.
Yeah, and it seems like there was a case where there would be no positive outcome, because the other alternative was she had met with foul play, and then if you saw that way, you'd be telling them that somebody killed her and left her someplace, and I don't think either outcome would be a happy one.
No, I mean, it was one or the other. I mean, it was going to be either this or that she met with foul play. And you're right. I mean, it would have been that would have also been very difficult. And if that had happened, that she did meet with foul play, then that kind of opens up, then the investigation has to continue, because then you have to find out, okay, well, who killed her, or at least try to. But in this case, she left. So yeah, it was tough for him, but in the end, they were happy that she was found.
And how did Mary Jane's second family react to this news?
They were also pretty shocked. They kind of went through similar stages of emotion, because Mary Jane never told her second family, the grandchildren, basically anything about her. They knew nothing about her past. Anything before she met their grandfather, Percy Sr., they knew nothing. I mean, it was just kind of like she just showed up. It was never discussed. And even their dad, Percy Jr., who had passed away in the early 2000s, also didn't really know a whole lot about his mother, or his mother's, side of the family. So they were shocked, and they were also kind of dismayed, because, Mary Jane had essentially misled them, for her whole life, or their whole life, saying that, she was essentially somebody else. So yeah, it was a shock to them, and it was a shock to them to see how much the case had grown. That there was so much work that was put into it. They just had no idea.
Yeah, so it's like two different families are blindsided by this news. I'm curious. Have the two families interacted with each other since this all unfolded?
Yeah, so I think that night that we got the pictures showing Mary Jane when she was younger, I added everybody on Facebook, and then I created a Facebook chat between all of them. The grandchildren from the second marriage, and Mindy and her sister from the first marriage, and they interacted that way. They have not met in person, but they've spoken to each other on social media.
And hopefully together, maybe they can piece some things together and maybe answer each other's questions and find some kind of peace with with that stuff they're able to put together. So it seems like Mary Jane didn't do anything extravagant to really disappear, just basically changed her last name and kept using the same birthday. Did she always use the same Social Security number through her entire life?
No, she got a new Social Security number.
Okay.
And that was issued sometime in the 50s in Louisiana. So that's why nothing showed on her original social. But when I look back in hindsight, there was a time at the beginning of the investigation where I went on Find a Grave and printed off all the Marys, everybody with the first name Mary, who was born on that day, November 19th of 1911. And it was, there was a lot, multiple pages. And then, I started to go through some of them and kind of vet them out, but there was just so many of them. And once I looked back into all the files that I kept, Mary Sebrin was on that list. I never got down to her. So, it was there kind of right in front of me. I just didn't reach her name when I was going down through the list.
Yeah. Well, that's got to be something to look back on and say, wow, she was in this hodgepodge of materials I had, but, it'd be like finding a needle in a haystack.
It was. It's a good analogy, because I did things like that. And then I would also get on Find a Grave and print off all the Jane Does in the United States. And so I'd print off the Jane Does using the term Jane Doe. But there are also people listed in Find a Grave just unknown last name, no first name, or unknown first name, unknown last name.
Mm-hmm.
And or skeleton or bones, or all kinds of different terms in Find a Grave. So there was a binder just full of search terms and their results. So that was also kind of like I was going through that binder and going through the unidentifieds and seeing if somebody matched up to Mary Jane. There was just it was right there in front of me, but like you said, it was a needle in a haystack.
And you never know which angle to work on, or maybe take a break from one and go work down another avenue,
Right.
and sort of get diverted from. Yeah, so it's totally understandable. And I think this is a case where, you asked for help along the way and enlisted, these volunteer people that are willing to dig into these cases, because you're only one person. You were doing this, from what I understand, a lot on your spare time. But you had helped somebody, this civilian you mentioned, that was able to come forward with this information that sort of spurred this case being solved. So I think it's just proof that when, law enforcement enlists the help of citizen sleuths out there, that they can help them in a lot of different ways, and finding different things and putting in the time that maybe law enforcement doesn't have to help solve a case.
Yeah, that's correct. And I don't know if I ever would have. So when I was doing my master's program, I was reading a lot of cold case research books, and the idea of enlisting civilians or volunteers was in a book called Cold Case Research by Sylvia Pedham. And she really had kind of laid out how important the civilians could be to law enforcement. And so I kind of adopted that philosophy early on, because it's just like there's so many years here and there's so little information. Maybe somebody else can provide a different philosophy, or have the time to look into stuff that I didn't, because I did do a lot of it on my spare time. But yeah, I think if law enforcement historically has kind of held everything kind of close to the chest and really not disclosed anything. And I don't know if that philosophy has really helped us. So I think, you kind of have to adopt new ways, especially in cases that there's absolutely no leads. If you have no leads left and you're kind of stumped, on what to do next, yeah, you should start asking the public. And you know, you should be looking for, you know, unidentifieds. You should be trying to do exhumations as well, because the only way that the unidentified people that have already been buried are going to be identified is if they're dug up and DNA is taken. So if you can do that and you can help solve another missing person case, you know, that's an angle that they should pursue.
Life can be chaotic. If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment add to the chaos. Use ShipStation instead. With ShipStation, you never have to worry about shipping and fulfillment again. Whether you're running a business out of your garage or you have multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your business's growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating repetitive tasks. Plus, you'll save money with the best shipping rates from global carriers. ShipStation's industry-leading features help you deliver a better customer experience. They'll get accurate and faster shipments along with automated tracking updates with your branding. And with up to 88% off UPS and USPS rates and up to 90% off FedEx rates, ShipStation is the fastest and most affordable way to ship. Calm the chaos. Switch to ShipStation today. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.
Yeah, and I'm always surprised when I hear it's like a 50 or 60-year-old case and the police are like, well, we can't talk about it. It's an open investigation. It's like everybody that's probably associated with them from back then has probably passed away. So, I mean, what is the harm of a 56-year-old case that you had the likelihood of solving is slim to none? Why not show the cards at that point and say, you know, at least we can close this off the books. Maybe we can get some help from the public. So I'm always a little bit surprised when agencies close off help from the public, and I'm, you know, excited when somebody like yourself works with the public and says, hey, I need some help here, and you get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest lesson, you know, for law enforcement here. If somebody, you know, reads about this case or hears about this case, is to, you know, like you said, if a case is old, you know, 50, 60 years old, if even if it was a homicide, everybody that's been involved with it has died. And if you have no other angles, there is no harm in asking the public for help. I think a lot of times, you know, law enforcement, I did have to field calls of people who meant well, but they had some theories about what happened to her that really couldn't be done. You know, that couldn't be vetted out. You know, somebody had told me early on, you know, like they had found all the bodies of water in Richland and Huron counties and wanted me to like drain all these ponds and lakes. And it's just like, that's not feasible. I mean, it's just not. So you do have to field through some calls and kind of vet out which ones are credible. But yeah, I mean, somebody on their own time looked into this case because they wanted to help, and they helped me solve it.
Yeah. And I know that you devoted many hours of your life on the clock, off the clock. You mentioned doing all these podcasts, talking in the news. I read that you even funded some of your own trips to do research on the case. What kind of toll did all this take on you personally, you know, as an investigator and, you know, just as a person?
So initially it was very exciting, and I really wanted to delve into it, and I put a lot of, like you said, I put a lot of time, energy, motivation, money, you know, into the case. But it did come with some negative consequences as well. My stress level, I was stressed about it. Because I had kind of opened myself up to the public, and I had opened myself up to the family, I was constantly getting tips about the investigation, even if I was off duty. So I carried a lot of it home with me, and it was just it was just stress, because it was something like I really wanted to do all these things that everybody was coming up with, but I knew that some of them just weren't feasible. So yeah, it's stressful. I mean, it was just it, and people say, well, it's it's a 78-year-old cold case. How is it stressful? It's just like, well, it just was. It was a lot of stuff because I have to document everything that happens. Because if something happened to me and I died, the next investigator who got the case would need to know everything that I did. And that's a problem too in law enforcement, is that these older cases, they were not well documented at the time, and the original investigators had died. And so when like the new generation kind of wants to try to solve that case, they don't have a lot of information. So all the tips that I got, on my personal Facebook, my work email, my personal email, my cell phone, my work phone, I had to basically vet all those tips out, document, write them out. Hey, on this date at this time, this person contacted me and suggested this. This is what I did, and it's not feasible to do or not credible. Yeah, it was heavy. It was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it seems like just a monumental undertaking to have to document everything and just sort of leave a checklist of just stuff along the way. And now that you've closed the case, it's that we mentioned how old it is, a almost 80-year-old case. Do you foresee a case ever that you're ever going to work on that could as big as this, and have you set the bar like super high now to anything else that you might work on in the future that you're going to have to try and live up to this one?
I've I've thought about that. This case will probably be the biggest case of my career. I'm on year 16. So I then I can retire, and I have to do 25 years, and then I can retire. So I don't have I have a couple years left. But this will probably be the biggest case that I will work. It's certainly been the biggest case ever worked in my department. It's probably one of the biggest cases paper-wise. If you printed out all my reports, it would astonish people how much stuff was there. I mean, it's probably hundreds of thousands of pages of just typing. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I've worked obviously current murders that happened recently in the last couple of years. Fortunately, those had been solved, and the suspects were arrested and sent to prison. So I have worked other big cases, but I don't think I'll ever have a case quite like this.
So just to maybe give some advice from your experience as we close this conversation out. If there's someone out there listening that's maybe a family member searching for a missing person, they've been searching for decades for them, or maybe you've got a fellow detective out there that's stumped on a case that he's been hung up on, it's 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. What advice would you give those people, based on your experience?
Well, the family, I would say, they'll never give up, obviously. But I would tell the family that, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if you don't contact law enforcement, and if you kind of stay in the shadows and do, your own investigations, but don't enlist the help of others, like, the general public, the media, your case isn't going to be worked. That's just kind of the way it is. So I would advise family members of missing people that they need to be in contact with a specific person, a detective, or a supervisor over a detective unit, frequently ask for updates. What's being done, either via phone calls or emails, or, you just have to be in contact with law enforcement, and stay in contact with them. Because if you do that, then your case is more likely than not to be worked. If you keep asking about it, law enforcement will respond. We have duty to respond. But, there's also current cases, and sometimes the older cases get kind of pushed to the back burner. So if you're not talking about it, that very well could happen to your case. To law enforcement. Another thing I would tell families is that, you need to really look into taking private DNA tests, ancestry, educating yourself on the advancements in DNA technology, and, taking tests on ancestry.com or 23andMe, and then, uploading your results to GEDmatch to see if possibly your missing loved one did do what Mary Jane did here and start another family. You might find out, some secrets about your family that you never knew. But to law enforcement, I think we have to kind of shift away from the philosophy of not enlisting the help of the public and just saying, it's an open investigation, we can't release anything. It's not benefiting us. I mean, there are just hundreds of thousands of cases in the United States that are just sitting dormant. And, I would, if you have a case of a missing person, you really need to be looking, again, to educate yourself on the advancements in DNA and consider doing exhumations. If you find a missing person, an unidentified person that matches the physical characteristics or circumstances or dates to your missing person, you need to kind of take the next step and to see if you can do an exhumation. And an exhumation, like, it sounds like it's this monumental task, but it's really not. If you find, like we did with Preble County when we identified Albert Frost, we had a great relationship with Preble County, the city of Eaton, and the coroner's office there. They kind of waived all the fees to do the opening and closing of the grave, and just because it was the right thing to do, and they had the equipment, they had the personnel, that's what their personnel was gonna do that day. They were gonna dig the grave. And there's grants that you can apply for to get DNA testing done on unidentified remains. And there's, crowdsourcing and funding, and, the public, again, will help and will donate money, just, out of the goodness of their hearts, to these cases to see them solved.
Well, that's great work and great advice, and just fascinating case all around. And the fact that you were able to solve it is just amazing. And, congratulations. I know you put a lot of time in, and I appreciate you coming on and discussing the case with us at length. And I'm glad you had some resolution in it.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And again, thank you for, you were one of the first ones that took up Mary Jane's case and had me on your show early on. And I really appreciate it. So I appreciate both times that you've featured Mary Jane's case.
No, thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Missing Persons. If you can provide any information to help solve the case we discussed in this episode, please contact the appropriate authorities.
If you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment to tell your friends about Missing Persons and invite them to listen to the show. Word of mouth will help us grow and bring these cases to a larger audience. You can also help us by taking a moment to rate and review Missing Persons on the platform you're listening to us now on. Just a reminder that new episodes of Missing Persons air every other Saturday. If you want to find us on social media, we're on Facebook at facebook.com/missingpersonspod. We're also on Twitter with the handle @missing_pod. And of course, you can find us and contact us through our website, missingpersonspodcast.com. On behalf of Jess Betancourt, this is Mike Morford saying thanks, and we'll see you next time on Missing Persons.
Life can be chaotic. If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment add to the chaos. Use ShipStation instead. With ShipStation, you never have to worry about shipping and fulfillment again. Whether you're running a business out of your garage or you have multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your business's growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating repetitive tasks. Plus, you'll save money with the best shipping rates from global carriers. ShipStation's industry-leading features help you deliver a better customer experience. They'll get accurate and faster shipments along with automated tracking updates with your branding. And with up to 88% off UPS and USPS rates and up to 90% off FedEx rates, ShipStation is the fastest and most affordable way to ship. Calm the chaos. Switch to ShipStation today. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.